Welcome back to Geppetto's Workshop, where we tackle painting the Orc Steamship. And I just wanted to show you some of the colors that I'm using today, and also the kind of brands that I'm using to paint, just to show you that you don't need really expensive paints to get a good result. I do have some Citadel colors here, but most of it is just 99-cent paint from the hobby store and Walmart, stores like that. Whenever I start a project, I usually start from the bottom and work my way up. This is a Typhus Corrosion from Citadel, and you'll see that I'll apply this pretty heavily to the bottom of the ship just to get the coverage that the black primer missed, or that I missed, I should say, with the black primer. This will be mounted to a base, so you're really not going to see the bottom anyway, but just in case anything happens to show through, I wanted to make sure I had a pretty heavy coverage on the bottom. And working with darker colors on the bottom to lighter colors on the top gives it a little bit more sense of depth. And, the sun obviously is mostly above any subject that you have, where your fading will be higher up on the object and not as prevalent on the bottom. So here I am just applying the Typhus Corrosion and kind of just heavy coverage. And I like to put on my first coats pretty heavily because I will be adding a lot of highlights and fading. So I want to make sure that the darker coats are pretty heavy. This is just an antique copper. I know it's kind of hard to see in the camera there. Again, this is going to be a copper, color scheme-ish, if you will. I was kind of trying to go for like a Nautilus or a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, kind of with a coppery patina look. I know most ships wouldn't be made fully out of copper, but these are orcs, and maybe they found a copper mine and decided to use that to build a ship out of. But here I am applying it fairly heavily as well, not as heavy as the Typhus Corrosion, but I do want a coverage of copper. The black primer, obviously, as most of you know, is just the base coverage, and I did want to have the copper stand out on this build. So you'll see I'm kind of doing a dry brush, but it is still a good amount of paint on the brush there. I also tend to use the same brush for multiple layers of color. That way you kind of blend all the colors together. As you see there, I'm actually dipping into the Typhus Corrosion that's on the ship. And I use the same paper towel. Unless I'm really changing the color scheme, I don't change brushes too often. You'll see me here, of course, in this paint job changing brushes, but with stuff like this base coat here, I want to pull some of that Typhus Corrosion through with the copper, just to get a good mix and to make things, not so uniform as they would be in real life. Now here we get on to the fun part, which is the rust. This is just some burnt orange, and word to the wise, less is better with rust. It is very easy to overdo it. This is where I tread lightly, so to say. I wouldn't be afraid of it because you can always darken it down, but you definitely want to watch your rust. I see a lot of projects out there sometimes overdo it on the rust, and there is such a thing as too much rust, in my opinion. If you're going for something that's in a junkyard and not usable, then pile on the rust by all means. But if it's something you want usable and with just some surface rust, or even a couple of rusty holes or whatever, definitely err on the side of caution here. That first pass admittedly was not rusty enough, in my opinion. So I went ahead and added some more paint, and you can see there I'm rubbing it off with my finger because I added a little too much paint. But as you can see, the rust is already starting to come through, which is the effect that I'm looking for. You really want to pay attention in life to everyday objects and see where rust generates from. Rust is almost a living thing, and you can treat it as such. So very prevalent in cracks, crevices, places where water would accumulate and not drain out. Seams, so stuff like where the rivets are, where there are implied seams on the ship, I want to hit those. Right now I'm just kind of doing an overall surface rusting, if you will. I will get into a little bit later doing a little more focus rusting, and actually because of the copper I did more patina work than actual rust work. Don't get me wrong, there is some rust here, but I didn't want it fully rusty. I wanted it more patina and rust. So we're going to go ahead and speed up this painting here, as not to bore you to death with my overall dry brushing of rust, and we'll get to the result of it. Now I know what most of you will say. This is a Citadel Ryza Rust. This is a dry paint, as they call it. And most of you are probably cringing that I'm using it at this step of the game. Most people would probably use this first, as it does create kind of a dry texture. And then you usually would paint over that. I kind of went a little backwards here. This Ryza Rust is very bright, as you can tell. Very, very important that you do not apply this very heavily, unless you're going to super cover it over, if that's a thing. You definitely don't want to leave this as is. It does dry a little darker, but this is for your more heavily rusted areas. And you'll see on some parts of the ship that there are some standout spots that should have probably been knocked down. But overall, it doesn't really affect too much. As you can see, I pretty much am still using the same first dip into the pot with this brush. And just kind of going over some areas. You can see right in front of that wheel there, that paddle, that there's a splotch there. I think I catch that later on. But yeah, Ryza Rust is a great paint. It's a great dry paint, but it is to be respected if you could respect a paint. Now, about this time, I wanted to add some blue to the ship, which I know some of you Warhammer and Warcraft folks are probably cringing at, because blue is the color for the humans, but I added it more for a steely metal look versus an actual paint look, and just something to break up all the browns and rusties of the current color scheme, if you will. I use this very sparingly, just pretty much along the bottom of the ship. And a little side note here, you'll notice that the little steam iron still has its eyes and nose. I thought about filling those in, but I kind of left them in as a little homage to the original toy. just to kind of show that it still had a little bit of life left in its old toyness, if you will. I also thought they would be cool, like I don't know, like bilge holes or maybe little torpedo ports, if you will. So you won't really see them too much in the final, but I wanted to kind of leave the original toy aspect at least a little intact to the iron, because I believe, you know, all toys have a purpose, and even though I chopped these two toys up to make this steamship, I still wanted to have a little bit of life in the original, at least one of the original toys that I used. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And now we get to the patina, and this color is called Ocean Breeze from Craftsmart.
Have you tried something simple like Ocean Breeze soap will get you clean?
And unlike what Kermit said, this Ocean Breeze is not going to get this boat clean, just the opposite actually. So what I'm doing here, and I'm probably starting out with the wrong size brush, is just trying to get some streaks down the side in a patina color. This color works really well for adding patina to copper. I probably should have used a smaller brush for this, but again, a lot of this is going to get covered up by darker paint, so we're not too worried about it. And here we have the lead belcher, which is kind of a dark silver or gunmetal-ish, and we're just going to use this to highlight some of the areas and some of the patches that we made on the ship. As we all know, orcs tend to be scrap builders and kind of patch up things with whatever they can find. So to add some color contrast to the ship, I thought we'd add some lead belcher to give it some steel plate looks, and to also pick off some highlights on the rivets and on some certain corners. That way there, it's not all just a brown blob floating in the sea. One color I didn't show in the beginning of the video is the Tamiya Smoke color, which is pretty much the same as Citadel Nuln oil. I don't have the Nuln oil from Citadel, and so I just have the Smoke, which I use on all my builds. Basically, I use this to kind of tie everything together. I go heavily in the creases and in the areas where items meet each other, like you can see there on the seam of the boat. Anywhere dark and hidden away from the light. And then I also go over areas that may stand out or be too bright, like any heavily rusted areas or too bright rust areas. And I also use it to kind of simulate, watermarks and such. Really good at bringing out a lot of the colors and kind of blending everything together. And it does dry pretty much matte for the most part. Maybe a little semi-gloss, but again, not too worried. This is a ship, so I do expect it to look a little wet. In fact, I do add some clear gloss to certain portions of this ship towards the end where it might be wet from obviously being in the water. Go figure.
How low can you go? Death row? What a brother no.
So now it's time to make the base, and I just put together a simple rectangle out of some spare wood that I had sitting around the workshop, and just hot glued everything together. And you'll see here in a second that I painted the exterior of it black and the interior aqua to resemble kind of a tropical type of water, if you will. And here I am hot gluing the ship itself to the base, so it is not removable. And I kind of gave it a upwards angle as if it was moving through the water. It was quite heavy at this point, so did require a little bit of holding in place. And speaking of water, we're going to go ahead and fill this base with some realistic water from Woodland Scenics. I would have used resin had I had some resin, but realistic water is a pretty affordable option for you. Resin can get quite expensive. I had this on hand already, and being that it was my first project, I went ahead and just used what I had. It's not very deep, so again, you'll have to imagine that the ship, there's more of it underneath, and you'll just mostly be able to see the top of the ship. Once the realistic water dried, I went and grabbed some Mod Podge, and you can see the realistic water on the bottle says it does not shrink, which is great. However, it did expand a little bit, and it popped the ends of the base, as you can see there. I was going to go ahead and add more wood and kind of level it all off, but I figured I would just paint it, and I kind of actually like the roughness of it, being that it is an Orc steamship. I kind of dig like that. It's kind of a rough looking base, if you will. If my OCD really gets to me too bad, I'll go ahead and add a thinner piece of wood and just paint it black and make everything even. But basically what I'm doing here with the Mod Podge is creating waves. This is going to dry clear, as most of you who are in this hobby know. Mod Podge does dry clear. It is a gloss. So once we get all these waves on it, making sure I get around the important areas, like the bow and behind the paddles there, it'll dry clear, and then we're going to go ahead and hit it with a dry brush of, I think I used vanilla color, not pure white, but I think it was a vanilla white, to make white caps and foamy sea around the ship. It also does cover up some mistakes on the base itself. For some reason, some of the realistic water you can see turned kind of a brownish. I don't know if it picked up some of the color from the ship itself, but we'll go ahead and buzz through this so you can see the results with the paint. Now you may be looking at it and saying, well, I can't really see anything you did with the Mod Podge, and you'd be right. However, the real magic comes once you get that dry brush going, and it'll actually pick up all of the swipes you did with the Mod Podge. Made sure I was careful to go back and forth with the dry brush. Not sure that it really matters. As you can see here, I abandoned that kind of quickly and just kind of got to it. You'll see once my big hand is out of the way that dry brush is starting to pick up all the ripples that we made with the Mod Podge. It's a hard word to say, Mod Podge. Wish I would have just named it Mod Podge. Would have been much easier. So yeah, it's kind of creating a foamy sea texture, if you will. And I did add a chain, as you can see there, in the water. Kind of, I guess, like an anchor. And I really like the effect that the Mod Podge gave to that anchor, along with the white paint. So we'll go ahead and speed this up and let you see the results.
to work.
Now, I'll be the first to admit that I am not a miniatures painter at all. In fact, these are probably the third and fourth miniatures I've ever painted. And I don't have all the fancy paints. So this is just basically some watered down acrylics. I did prime the orcs after putting them together. Huge shout out to my buddy Keith over at Outlaw Speed Shop for donating some leftover Citadel orcs he had. So I put the orcs together, and I'm just starting here with super thin layers of the forest green on the skin, and then everything I do with the orcs as far as painting is just very watered down and thin paint. And I think they came out pretty decent for some of my first real miniatures. But I'll let you guys be the judge. Before I show the final reveal, I'd like to first give a thanks and shout out to some of the channels I've been watching as of late. Mainly to CC Minis, who was the inspiration. Had he not done a couple videos of turning his son's toys into Orc steam tanks, I would have probably not had the idea to tackle this project. Some say it was a big project from my first true kit bash video, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely, and I promise I will get better on the videos, and they won't be as long. Check out the channels that scrolled by, and please, if you do like the content, please share and subscribe. Other than that, on to the reveal.